Dewani's trial has adjourned for lunch in the Western Cape High Court, and I'm joined in studio by News 24's Emma Thelwell, who's sitting through proceedings and who's nipped out of the courtroom to speak to us today in studio about what's happened. Emma, thanks for joining us.
Hi, no problem.
So, who is testifying today?
So today we've got a new witness, the investigating officer, Captain Paul Hendrick, who was there, who was in charge the night of the murder when it happened, and he's just been going through what Dewani's first statement was, how he might have altered it, because obviously when something first happens, the officer was explaining it was very stressful and he wanted to just check a few facts with Dewani. Interestingly though, he did say that the first he had heard of this helicopter ride that Dewani, the story about Dewani organising a surprise helicopter ride and exchanging lots of money and taking out a lot of cash with him that night. The first that the officer had heard of that was actually in court under the plea bargain. So that hadn't been heard, in his original witness statement. That wasn't what Dewani said.
Right. Now, was he given the opportunity to be, or I suppose was the defence given the opportunity to cross-examine him?
Yes, we've just started with the defence, so who's sort of trying to pick holes in the officer's investigating diary and saying that it actually finished early. They stopped taking notes or stopped keeping a diary on the case because obviously it's 4 years now, and he was asking why he stopped it, and then picking other holes such as ballistics. There were a few sort of problems with the evidence, and he was very much trying to pin it on. So Van Zyl, the defence attorney, was trying to pin it on Captain Hendrick, and Captain Hendrick looked completely exasperated at one point. He said, look, he really wouldn't take responsibility for it, and he blamed it on the ballistics police officers and other officers, basically, and wasn't prepared to accept that it was his fault, even though he's the lead officer on the case.
Now, many media reports today and this week suggest that this is really not looking good for the state. Did you get that impression?
Yes, definitely. There was a point this morning when the prosecutor was continually hauled back by the judge for asking in what she said were questions that weren't relevant, and things that she said, I want facts, not hearsay, and she kept stopping him and starting him again, and he was basically just trying to go through the events of the investigation, but the judge felt that a lot of them weren't facts. They were just rumour or stories that come out in the media since. So he had a difficult morning, but it was interesting that he had 2 emails from Annie to Dewani, to Xuan, sorry, that was sent, I think it was 5 days after, or 7 days after they got married. 7 days before she died. And they said some quite worrying things. I mean, she said she'd had enough, and she had her bags packed and she was ready to go, and that although they'd had a Bollywood wedding, there was no need to be Bollywood actors and pretend everything was fine, and she wanted a man whose feelings were natural, and she expressed concern in her email that he wasn't natural with her, and that they'd obviously had some argument during which he'd told her things that she felt she should have heard before they got married. She said, if I'd known this, maybe I wouldn't have married, So a lot of things came out in these emails which were very interesting. But the defence was quick to point out that we didn't hear Xuan's replies, and he was trying to show that actually a lot of the chat was perhaps jokes between couples. I guess it's a matter of opinion.
Wow. If they are able to prove that, that's quite something.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot going on this morning. It'll be interesting to see how Captain Hendrick sort of fares under Van Zyl's question this afternoon. He really doesn't give up on his questions. So so this afternoon, we'll see what happens.
Now we're coming up to the 4-year anniversary of Annie's death, and you mentioned before the camera started rolling that you're sitting quite close to the Hindocha family. How do they seem?
Yeah, I was actually sitting right next to them. They were just sort of slightly below the media bank, and when the emails were read out, it was sad to see her mother sort of bent down and put her eyes down. Her father also bowed his head, and it must have been a difficult time for them to hear the words, and but they seemed to be very supportive of each other. Her father had his arm around her mother, and I suppose they're coping as best they can with hearing evidence like that. I couldn't really see his family, Shrion's family, because he was on the other side. They were on the other side of the courtroom, so I didn't get a very good view of them.
That's News 24's Emma Thelwell. She's tweeting from News 24's Twitter account, so you can stay updated on all the latest developments in the Shrion Dewani trial. For all your latest Shrion Dewani video news, stay tuned to News 24 Live.